sounds for the word between the walls. Gently repeats as the boundaries start to swirl. Keep to the core, that is what is now living on. It's not the same where the trails lead to the outer regions. Echoes from the other world turn horizons into endless ever-present. Echoes bear the other world's true horizon starts to turn. Numberless names with the force of the ninth wave. Keep to the call that's repeated in the outer regions. Echoes from the other world turn horizons into endless ever-present. Echoes bear the other world's true horizon takes a turn. Echoes reflect and change, they serenade. Echoes reflect and change, they serenade. Ever-present echoes, many other worlds, true horizon makes the endless ever-present. Echoes into other worlds, true horizons into endless ever-present. Echoes, many other worlds, true horizon starts to turn. Echoes reflect and change, they serenade. Echoes reflect and change, they serenade. They serenade. Serenade.
Is overrated. I have tried my best. Speak up now, or let me lay in rest. On the count of three, upset light is all I see. Words clearly written, but I cannot read, cannot breathe. Incapable of being anything but weak. Bones cracking every time I stretch. My blood burns me as it does its laps. Around this track of trash that is out. More gas on my brain that it tripped in my mind.
I don't know why you're doing it, but it's not good and it's not healthy. It's not right. Not that I'm saying you don't have it together. I'm sure you do. You're a genius, and you really are. You're a genius.
I know.
But
the reason I can say I know is because of the word genius. Not something that individually, it's not anything individually necessarily has to take credit for.
Bones cracking every time I stretch. My blood burns me as it does its laps. inside my brain that it tripped in my mind.
Give me love like her. Cause lately I've been waking up alone. Paint splattered teardrops on my shirt. Told you I'd let them go, that I'll fight my corner. Maybe tonight I'll call you after my blood turns into alcohol. No, I just wanna hold you. Give a little time to me, we'll burn this out. We'll play hide and seek to turn this around. Is the taste that your lips allow. My mind, oh give me love. 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 My mind, give me love. Give me love like never before. Lately I've been craving more. And it's been a while, but I still feel the same. Maybe I should let you go. You know I'll fight my corner, and that tonight I'll after my blood, it's drowning in alcohol. No, I just wanna hold you. Give a little time to me, we'll burn this out. We'll play hide and seek to turn this around. And all I want is the taste that your lips allow. My mind, oh give me love. Give a little time to me, burn this out. We'll play hide and seek to turn this around. All I want is the taste that your lips allow. My mind, oh give me love. 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 My mind, give me love.
Give me love, give me
nothing left to see. If it hurts and you can't take no more, lay it all on me. No, you don't have to keep it under lock and key, 'cause I will never let you down. And if you can't escape all your uncertainties, baby, I can show you how. Let my love in, let my love in. Lay your heart on me. If you're hurting, if you're hurting, lay it all on me. Yeah, you can lay it all on me. You can lay it all on me. If you're hurting, if you're hurting, lay it all on me. If you're scared when you're out on your own, just remember me, 'cause I won't let you go it alone. Lay it all on me. No, you don't have to keep it under lock and key, 'cause I will never let you down. And if you can't escape all your uncertainties, baby, I can show you how. Let my love in, let my love in. Lay your heart on me. If you're hurting, if you're hurting, lay it all on me. Yeah, you can lay it all on me. You can lay it all on me. If you're hurting, if you're hurting, lay it all on me. So if you're hurting, babe, just let your heart be free. You got a friend in me. I'll be your shoulder anytime you need. Baby, I believe. So if you're hurting,